The wind howled through the hollow streets of Ravenshade, a forgotten town buried beneath layers of silence and old secrets. Locals claimed the earth itself remembered what had happened here, and sometimes it whispered about it at night. Mira Patel didn't believe in ghost stories, not until the day she moved into the old Harrow house. Perched at the edge of town, the house stood beside a patch of land everyone called the Red Grave, a stretch of soil that never grew grass, even in spring. They said it was cursed. They said it swallowed anything that lingered too close. But Mira, a city journalist chasing her next big expose, brushed it off as small-town superstition. The house was exactly what she expected. Creaking floors, dusty rooms, the faint smell of mildew clinging to the walls. But something about it felt awake, as if the air itself was watching. Her flashlight flickered when she first stepped into the hallway, the light trembling over the faded wallpaper where strange red handprints had been painted long ago. The real estate agent had laughed nervously when Mira asked about them. "It's just part of the house's character," he'd said. But the way his eyes darted toward the red grave outside told a different story. By the second night, Mira couldn't sleep. The wind seemed to whisper her name through the cracks in the windows. "Mira, come outside." She told herself it was just her imagination. Still, she found herself standing at the window, staring at the barren patch of crimson earth glowing faintly beneath the moonlight. Then she saw it, a figure. A woman standing at the center of the red grave, her dress flowing like smoke, her face hidden in shadow. Mira blinked, and the woman was gone. The next morning, she found a letter slipped beneath her front door. The envelope was old, its paper yellowed with age, her name written in faded red ink. Inside was a single sentence. "You shouldn't have come back." But Mira had never been to Ravenshade before, or had she? The memories she didn't know she'd lost began to stir. Images of a girl crying beside a grave, hands covered in dirt and blood-red soil. Mira stumbled back from the letter, her breath trembling. The wind outside began to rise again, rattling the windows as though something unseen was pounding to be let in. And then, from deep beneath the ground near the red grave, came a sound. A heartbeat. Slow. Rhythmic. Alive. Mira turned toward the window, her reflection pale against the glass. But there, standing just behind her reflection, was a face that wasn't hers. The lights went out. The next few days in Harrow House blurred together, each one heavier than the last. Mira tried to stay busy, recording interviews, jotting notes for her article, convincing herself the letter was an elaborate prank. But every night the whispers returned. Sometimes they sounded like her mother's voice. Other times they spoke in tones she didn't recognize. Low, echoing, pleading. Mira wasn't entirely alone in Ravenshade. Her friend and photographer, Ethan Cole, had joined her for the story. He didn't believe in ghosts either, but he believed in patterns. And something about this town was wrong. The townsfolk avoided eye contact when Mira asked about the red grave. They mumbled about the girl who disappeared and the child who came back wrong. Ethan joked that they'd stumbled into a local legend, but even his laughter sounded forced. By the fourth night, Mira began to dream. Always the same vision. Standing barefoot in the crimson soil, hands digging frantically as whispers begged her to find what was buried. She'd wake up with dirt beneath her fingernails, her bedsheets dusted with red stains. Ethan noticed her pale complexion, her trembling hands. "You need sleep," he said, half concerned, half afraid. But Mira didn't need sleep. She needed answers. She found an old newspaper in the library's archive dated 20 years ago. The headline froze her blood. "Local girl missing after red grave ritual." The photograph beside it showed a young girl, one who looked eerily like her. When she confronted Ethan with the discovery, he went silent. "Mira," he whispered, "that can't be you. You weren't even born then." But deep down, she wasn't sure anymore. That night, as the wind clawed at the windows and the walls groaned like something breathing beneath them, Mira heard the whisper again, closer this time. "You remember now, don't you?" The following morning brought no relief. The air in Harrow House felt heavier, thicker, as though it clung to Mira's lungs each time she tried to breathe. The light that filtered through the dusty curtains seemed dimmer, tinted with an unnatural red hue. Ethan packed his camera bag, muttering under his breath. "We need to leave," he said. "This place isn't just haunted, it's wrong." But Mira couldn't. Something inside her refused to go. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was compulsion. "Just one more night," she told him. "There's something here. Something we're meant to find." Ethan didn't argue, but his silence said enough. That afternoon, an elderly neighbor came by. A frail woman named Mrs. Calloway, wrapped in a moth-eaten shawl. She stood at the gate, trembling, refusing to step past the red grave's edge. "You shouldn't be in that house," she whispered. "It remembers what it takes." When Mira asked her what that meant, the old woman's eyes watered. "It doesn't like the ones who belong to it. The earth never forgets its children." Then she turned and limped away before Mira could stop her. That night, the house began to stir. Doors slammed without wind. A mirror shattered upstairs, though no one had touched it. Mira and Ethan found words scrawled across the hallway in smeared red dust. "Dig it up." Ethan accused Mira of doing it in her sleep, her eyes flickering with exhaustion and fear. She swore she hadn't. But doubt crept in. The dreams, the stains, the buried memories. What if she had? As they argued, the temperature dropped sharply, their breath fogged in the air. From the kitchen came the sound of footsteps, slow, dragging, deliberate. Ethan raised his flashlight. "Who's there?" Silence. Then, 3 knocks on the floorboards beneath them. Boom, boom. The flashlight flickered, revealing a new crack splitting the floor. Thin at first, then widening until they could see a sliver of red soil beneath. The house groaned as if alive, beams trembling, the walls pulsing faintly like veins. Panicking, Ethan pulled Mira toward the door, but she stopped, staring at the crack. Her name was carved there, deep into the wood. Not once, but over and over, layered upon itself. Mira. Dozens of times. Her legs buckled as memories surged. Dirt, screaming, a circle of people chanting under a blood-red moon. A hand pushing her down, her voice begging to be let go. When she looked back up, Ethan was gone. His flashlight lay on the floor, still rolling, its beam shaking wildly. She called his name. No answer. Only the faint whisper from the basement below. "He's with us now." Mira froze, staring at the crack in the floor. From within it, something pale and thin began to reach upward, fingers clawing through the dirt. And this time, they were real. The storm rolled in without warning. By dusk, Harrow House stood beneath a sky the color of dried blood, lightning illuminating the red grave in violent flashes. Mira barred the doors and windows, her hands trembling as wind screamed through the cracks like distant voices begging to be heard. Ethan was still missing. She'd searched every room, every hallway, even the attic, but it was as if he had been erased from existence. Only his camera remained, lying in the living room where she'd found it, the lens cracked but still warm to the touch. When she played the footage, her blood froze. The video showed Ethan descending into the basement. He turned toward the camera one last time, whispering, "It's calling your name." Then the screen filled with static, and a shadow moved behind him, tall, thin, and wrong. A crash echoed from downstairs. Mira dropped the camera. Something had slammed against the front door once, twice, then a violent pounding that rattled the entire frame. She backed away, whispering to herself, "It's not real. It's not real." The pounding stopped. Silence. Then faintly, a voice. Ethan's voice. "Mira, let me in." Her heart twisted. "Ethan?" But when she looked through the peephole, there was no one there. Only the shifting red mist swirling over the ground. The soil outside pulsed faintly as if breathing. The lights flickered and died. The house exhaled darkness. In the black, she heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling her. A whisper brushed her ear. "You were meant to stay." Mira stumbled toward the staircase, her flashlight flickering on and off. The walls around her began to change. Photos of strangers she'd never seen now lined the corridor, their eyes scratched out. But in the center of the gallery was a new photo. Hers. Someone had scrawled beneath it, "Returned." Her breath hitched. The truth clawed at her mind. The nightmares, the whispers, the sense she'd been here before. It wasn't imagination. It was memory. She found herself drawn toward the basement door, where faint scratching came from the other side. The handle was cold, trembling under her touch. She should have run, but something in her chest urged her to open it, to finally see what the red grave wanted her to remember. "Mira," the voice whispered again, soft, almost tender now. "You left me down there." Her heart pounded. "Ethan?" A pause, then a rasp, low and broken. "Not anymore." The door burst open. A blast of icy air swept through the house. The flashlight flew from her hand. And for a single instant, she saw it. Something that wore Ethan's shape, but moved like smoke, its face shifting, hollow eyes glowing faintly red. It reached toward her. And in the moment before darkness swallowed everything, Mira heard the earth outside split open, and the red grave began to breathe. Mira woke to silence. Not the comforting kind, but the heavy, suffocating stillness that comes after a scream. The house no longer groaned or whispered. Even the wind had died. Only the faint, rhythmic thumping beneath the floor reminded her that something alive, or pretending to be, still lingered below. Her head throbbed. The last thing she remembered was the face. Ethan's face, but wrong, reaching for her in the dark. Now she sat in the corner of the basement, the air damp and metallic. Her flashlight flickered on, cutting through the shadows. And there he was. Ethan. Kneeling in front of the red grave soil that bled through the cracked concrete, his fingers digging into it like it was calling to him. His skin was pale, veins faintly glowing red beneath. "Ethan?" she whispered. He turned slowly. His eyes were empty, not black, not white, just gone. "You remember now," he said. "You always come back." Her breath caught. "What are you talking about?" He smiled, not with warmth, but with a strange, knowing sadness. "You think this house haunted you, Mira? No, you haunted it." The basement trembled as the walls began to pulse with a low, steady heartbeat. From beneath it, bones, dozens of them, began to surface, glowing faintly red. And then she saw her own name carved onto each skull. "No!" she gasped. "This can't be real." "It's always been real," Ethan said, or whatever was wearing Ethan's skin. "You were part of the ritual. You were the offering." The truth struck like lightning. The newspaper article, the missing girl, the memories of digging, of chanting, of blood-soaked earth. She hadn't been an outsider investigating a curse. She was the curse, resurrected again and again by the house that refused to let her go. Ethan's voice deepened, twisting through layers of echo. "You think you left Ravenshade, but you never left the grave." Mira stumbled backward, trembling. "If this is true, why bring me back?" The shadows around the room began to move, forming faces, whispering in unison. "To finish what you started." Her mind splintered between memory and madness. She remembered the night, 20 years ago, when Shidi led them all into the ritual. Not as a victim, but as the one who had called the red grave awake. She looked at Ethan again, tears streaking her face. "I didn't mean to." "But you did," the voices hissed. "And the grave remembers its mother." The floor split beneath her, red light spilling upward like liquid fire. Mira screamed as unseen hands reached from below, grasping her ankles, pulling her toward the open wound of the earth. She clawed at the ground, desperate, but Ethan only watched, smiling faintly. "Welcome home," he whispered. The last thing she saw before the world turned crimson was her own reflection in the dirt, smiling back at her. The world was burning red. Mira's scream echoed through the collapsing basement as the soil pulled her downward, swallowing her in waves of glowing dust and bone. The red grave pulsed like a living heart, its rhythm syncing with her own until she could no longer tell where she ended and the curse began. Then, silence. She awoke in darkness, lying in a vast chamber beneath the house. The walls pulsed faintly with red veins of light, as if the earth itself was alive. Whispers rippled through the air, thousands of voices layered atop one another, pleading, angry, mournful. At the center of the room stood a stone altar, and upon it, Ethan, or what was left of him. His body was twisted, his face shifting between human and shadow. "You should never have fought it," he said, his voice echoing like thunder underwater. "You brought it here. You gave it life." Mira staggered toward him, trembling. "I didn't know what I was doing. I was just a child." "But you called it," Ethan hissed, his mouth stretching into something inhuman. "You called the Red One, and it never forgot your name." The ground beneath her cracked open, red mist spilling upward like breath. The whispers grew louder, forming words that cut through her mind. Return the blood. End the cycle. Mira's hands began to glow, her veins tracing with the same red light that filled the chamber. Memories flooded back. She had been part of the original ritual, the girl chosen to awaken something buried deep below Ravenshade. But when it had answered, she had run, leaving the others to die. Now it wanted her back. The air split with a shriek as the Red One emerged, a towering figure made of shifting soil and shadow, its eyes burning like coals. The entire chamber shook with its presence. Ethan's voice rose, twisted with agony. "Give yourself to it! End this!" Mira's mind splintered between guilt and fury. She had carried the curse all her life without knowing. Maybe she couldn't destroy it, but she could stop it from spreading. She stepped onto the altar, facing the creature. "If it's my blood it wants," she whispered, "then it ends with me." The Red One leaned closer, its voice like the grinding of stone. "You can't end what you began." But Mira reached into her pocket, the cracked camera. She lifted it, pressed record, and screamed into the lens, "It's not the house, it's the soil. Don't—" The entity struck. The screen went black. The ground convulsed. The entire house above caved inward, collapsing into the red grave. And then, nothing. For a long time, Ravenshade was silent again, until one day, years later, construction crews came to rebuild on the land. As the first shovel struck the dirt, red dust rose into the air, glowing faintly under the sun. The foreman frowned. "Strange," he muttered. "This ground, it's warm." Behind him, his phone buzzed. A new video had uploaded automatically to the cloud. Title: Red Grave, Final Record. Uploader: Mira Patel. Ravenshade was quiet again. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky the color of ashes and a town that dared not look toward the ruins at its edge. Where Harrow House once stood was now only scorched earth, the same patch of crimson soil that had never grown grass. Locals whispered that the ground had finally gone still. But at night, when the wind shifted, some swore they could still hear a heartbeat beneath their feet. 3 weeks after the collapse, a recovery team found what was left of Ethan Cole's camera. The footage was corrupted, except for the final 30 seconds. In it, Mira's face appeared, pale and trembling, her eyes glowing faintly red. She whispered something just before the feed cut out. No one could agree on what she said. Some claimed it was, "It's over." Others swore it was, "It begins again." No trace of Mira's body was ever found. The townsfolk sealed off the land, calling it unstable. Though everyone knew the truth, they refused to speak aloud. The red grave didn't like being disturbed. The soil was warm to the touch, as if it still remembered her. Months passed. The media turned the tragedy into headlines and hashtags. Paranormal forums debated whether Mira had been a journalist or a conduit. But to those who had known her, she became a ghost story. The woman who went searching for truth and found something far older, far hungrier, waiting beneath her feet. Then, one autumn night, Mrs. Calloway, the old neighbor who had warned Mira, heard a knock at her door. 3 soft knocks just after midnight. When she opened it, no one was there. Only a small package wrapped in aged paper, her name written in red ink. Inside was a single Polaroid. It showed the red grave, freshly dug, and standing beside it, smiling faintly, was Mira. Behind her, the soil seemed to ripple, as if something beneath was moving. Mrs. Calloway burned the photo before dawn, but even as she did, she could swear she heard Mira's voice in the flames. "I stayed to keep it quiet. Don't dig again." Ravenshade learned its lesson, or so it claimed. The red grave was fenced off, left to rot under weeds and fog. Yet sometimes, travelers still pass through the town, curious about the legend. They take photos from behind the fence, daring each other to step closer. And sometimes, just sometimes, their cameras capture a flicker. A figure standing at the center of the red soil, her eyes dark, her hand outstretched toward the lens. Mira Patel, forever guarding the grave she once awoke. The curse was quiet now. But quiet doesn't mean gone.